something, you never know.
Oh, great.
Hi, Michael.
Howdy.
Get used to being a celebrity there.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
I thought I'd walk in and you guys would all have your hands raised and get sworn in. When
We did that already.
Did that already?
Yep, we didn't do the voting for,
We have to do something to officially. Or it's just the fact that it's. They're not even there.
been a long time since we did a ZBA.
Years of them. I think that speaks to my ability to get things done outside of the need for variance.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep,
Nice
just
to meet
clean it up. Mhm.
Hi, Mr. Womack. Rollins, how are you, sir?
All right. Got a quorum, so I'll go ahead and call the meeting of the special Cedar Springs Zoning Board of Appeals to order at set 4:31. If everyone would please rise and recite their pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I will now open the floor for nominations for chairperson.
I'll nominate Mr. Craig Owens for chairperson.
I second that.
Are there any other nominations? I will close the floor for nominations. Mr. Owens, would you accept your nomination?
I will.
Call the roll call vote for Mr. Craig Owens for chairperson. Ms. Powell,
Yes.
Mr. Jernigan,
Yes.
Mr. Owens.
Yes.
Thank you. I'll issue your oath. I, Craig Owens, do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Michigan, the city charter and code of ordinances of the city of Cedar Springs, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of ZBA chairperson to the best of my abilities.
I will.
Congratulations.
Thank you, and I will turn the meeting over to you.
I don't know whether to thank you guys or not.
We won't have another one for 4 years. we hope.
There you go.
All right, so we will open the floor for nominations for vice chairperson. I believe that Paul served in that position before, so I'll nominate her. Second that. I don't see any other nominations from anybody else. Do I need to do a roll call or can I just do a voice vote on that?
I would do a roll call.
Okay. All right. Mr. Jernigan,
Yes.
Mr. Owens votes yes. Ms. Powell,
Yes.
thank you very much.
I will follow, do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State. The city charter and code of Cedar Springs. And I will faithfully discharge the duties of vice chairperson to the best of my ability.
I will.
I'll say, Joe, I've got some bad news for you. There's one more spot open.
Recorder, yeah.
All right, so we will now open the floor for nomination for the office of secretary of the ZBA.
I'll nominate Joe Jernigan.
And I will support that. Any other nominations? All right, we'll close the floor for that. Ms. Powell,
Yes.
Mr. Owens votes yes. Mr. Jernigan,
Yes.
very good. Thank you.
I, Joe Jernigan, do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Michigan, city charter and code of ordinances of the city of Cedar Springs, and I will faithfully discharge the duties of ZBA secretary.
I do.
right, now that we all know who all of us are, we can officially do the roll call. Mr. Jernigan,
Present.
Mr. Schmitz, we have not heard from, right?
Correct.
Okay, so we'll mark him as absent. We have a vacancy that we'd like to fill at some point. Mrs. Powell,
Yes.
Mr. Owens is here. I would move that we approve our agenda, as we have presented for us this afternoon.
A second?
Any discussion on the agenda? All in favor of approving that, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Carries. Our December 16th, 2019, believe it or not, last time that we this body met. And we have the minutes there. Believe it or not, I kind of remembered this meeting.
I did too.
I would approve the minutes as presented with just one thing. Our item of business, we had recorded, we actually tabled it, but that property is no longer owned by the people who had made the request. So I think that we can officially mark that request as abandoned at this point. So I would make the approval or the motion to approve those December 16th, 2019 minutes with that one clarification.
Want a second on that?
Mr. Owens, just to clarify, you're not proposing that we change the determination?
No, just so that we have it cleaned off the records, nice and neat. Don't have anything dangling out there. But other than that, I think the minutes were accurate. We're just, so as they were presented to us, we can approve them. Did you second that?
Yes.
Okay. Any discussion, anything that you spot on there? I know Mr. Jernigan wasn't there to. Think it looked pretty accurate and good.
Yes.
All right, so all in favor of approving those minutes, aye.
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 All opposed, no. Okay, motion carries. Thank you. All right, this is our time in our meeting where if you have any conflicts of interest with our issue this evening that's on our agenda or any ex parte communication that you need to report, this would be the spot to report.
Had none, other than my sitting in council and hearing and absorbing a lot of these things over the last few months.
Yes. And likewise, when I was on the planning commission, this was also something that came before us a couple of times, but nothing specific to tonight's meeting.
No conflicts.
Mr. Owens, if I might inquire, would either of those things that either of you spoke about impinge your ability to render a fair and impartial judgment and decision in tonight's meeting?
Not for me.
Not for me.
Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying that. I make a motion that we open the public hearing regarding 84 South First Street in Cedar Springs, Michigan. Support for that motion?
Support.
Okay. All in favor of opening the meeting, aye.
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 All opposed, no. Becca, is there anybody that's online that I need to be like checking to see if anybody has comments when we do this part?
At this time, there is nobody online for
Okay.
public comment.
So, this obviously is has been a lengthy and ongoing process. And, so you have, I think it was 30 pages of information in your packet for us to look at this. I think Mr. Womack did a really good job summing up and telling us that he doesn't know which way to go on any of these things, but giving us a lot of information to make a decision. But anything that you want to sum up on that, Mr. Womack?
Well, so first to clarify, it's not at least I don't see it as my position to advocate one way or the other, so I wasn't trying to influence your decision.
Right.
Provide information for you to make a decision.
That's correct.
But I think that would be a fair statement that this is not a clear-cut case either way. I think either way the board were to determine in the situation would be supported by both the facts and the law. The main concern I have at this point is that the applicant's application that he submitted While it's, he clearly cares very deeply about the situation, I don't know if he properly addressed the legal concerns and the legal questions that are required of this board to make determinations on. Now, if the board wants to, they can proceed forward and do their best to muddle through. But it might be worth your time to allow the applicant an additional opportunity to address the questions. An applicant seems to be hung up on a separate issue, which is a legal non-conforming issue, which is being worked on through the city council and city administration. This obviously is a variance. It is a completely different situation. Different standards apply. As you guys saw in the work that I put together what I thought might be fair arguments for the applicant to make, but those are not his arguments. So I certainly don't want to put words into the applicant's mouth. And I just don't know if this board has sufficient information or facts or reasoning or argument to find in the applicant's favor the way his application currently stands. So you may want to discuss the issue, speak with the applicant, see if you can maybe suss out, even orally, arguments that he might have on his behalf. But it might be worth tabling the issue and bringing it back for another look through at a later date. And I'm happy to answer any questions moving forward.
So, Mr. Spitzbergen, have you heard from, Mr. Womack about like kind of clarifying some of those legal issues? Okay. Okay. And so here's kind of the issue that's before us is, what you're requesting is a variance application as opposed to a legal non-conforming, and there's certain evidence that you need to present to us for us to be able to rule that way. And as Mr. Womack said, right now, we really don't have that information to be able to, we don't even have the evidence to be able to rule on the variance. So therefore we'd have to say, we couldn't do it without you having the opportunity to put together some more evidence for us.
What kind of evidence are you looking for?
Well,
If I could, so Mr. Spitzbergen indicated I've not communicated with him. Madam Clerk, did you send Mr. Spitzbergen the information that is contained in the packet?
Correct, he was emailed that information.
So I did communicate with him the same I communicated with the board. He has
Mhm.
access to all the information that has been presented to the board. Which, he should be able to read and understand what the arguments have been made. I don't want to call it flippant, but the answers are very specific. I'm sorry, the questions are very specific, what they're looking for. I understand the stuff is complicated. But I don't feel that the questions are properly addressed. So I did my best to put together what I thought might be appropriate arguments to be made. But those are the applicant's arguments to be made.
So we are, I think this board is disposed to potentially tabling this to give you an opportunity to put together more information, or we can just. Okay.
I'm totally confused. I don't know what information he's referring to that I was given that. If I don't know. I saw a letter of the notice of the meeting. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well,
If I could see a copy of that or something, I might be able to address those two questions we have right now.
okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess you could, but you'd be doing it off the top of your head. I want you,
I'm well versed in this. I'm
Okay.
aware.
I want you to be able to give us your best answers. So,
I will be able to give
um,
my best answer. I've been working on this for over a year.
Mr. Chairman, could I
yes.
suggest that we at least go over the application and see what we can figure out or
Well,
discuss on
I-
that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we could, but I'm a little, I mean, like Mr. Womack said, he's already kind of given the applicant like good arguments that he could make, and I don't know that I want to.
Well, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
So applicant is sitting here before us saying he's confused, he doesn't understand what's going on, so it might be best to at least explain to him where his errors might lie, so that he has a better opportunity to go back and if you guys want to, ask him to address the questions that he has not, which are found in the application. You know, I did not make this form. Had I made it, it would be maybe a little bit better, but the form was made in 2014 and it does ask the questions that need to be answered in order to really properly be addressed as a variance.
Good. Is it possible, my copy's all marked up, but do we have like a hard copy that we could print out for him? Yes. No, we have the application as well, but.
The entire packet.
Yeah,
If you could give me a few minutes, I could.
so why don't we just, I think we'll just, how about if we just call for a temporary recess here while we'll get you that information so you can look it over and then, be able to, yep.
Correct, the agenda packet.
What? Okay, all right,
Well, we can't, we're on recess, so.
yeah.
They had open house at the Brook today.
Oh, for,
An event,
oh, okay. Wow.
nice, good music, free food.
How many, like, open rooms do they have?
We were all sitting outside. If you go inside, you gotta wear a mask.
Oh, they still request that?
Yeah, if you go inside. Yeah, still got COVID going around.
Well, I caught that. We just got back from Europe and I caught it, probably about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Insane over in Italy and everything like that. It's crazy, but they checked our passports, but not any shots or anything.
Huh.
No. Come on in.
Bring your money.
It was over 100 degrees. I mean, if
Oh, man.
it's 100 degrees there, it's hot.
Yeah.
So for the first few days.
There's a real good band, Wednesday night at the amphitheater, Bluegrass, excellent.
We can hear from the house
Can you?
too. Yeah, yeah.
This guy is one of the best bluegrass artists, guitar players.
How's the attendance been for that?
Not the best.
But it's working, you know.
Sometimes it's maybe a couple hundred and some, usually around a couple hundred. But it's
Okay.
such a big area, you really don't feel squashed in.
Yeah, for its first year, I think that's pretty good. Oh, is it 2 years now? Okay.
We opened up right after COVID, so 21. And the kids just get out there and run, and jump and roll. It's so much fun to watch. So many kids don't have a place to do that,
Exactly.
and they sure take advantage of it.
Utility
Right.
billing clerk found an inopportune time to get her water bills stuck in the printer. So the clerk is attempting to print it on a different printer right
And then there's free movies on Tuesday.
I know, I saw you a
Couple
couple
times, yeah.
of weeks ago when you were skipping out on the meeting.
Yeah, well, I figured planning commission could get along with
Oh,
that
I would get on with that.
once or twice.
Yeah, next week is American Graffiti. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, I
Oh,
don't
yeah,
know if
that's
they'll bring a
impressive.
bunch of cars like they did for Smokey and the
Smokey and the
Bandit.
Bandit.
That was good. I was hoping somebody would bring a DeLorean for Back to the Future.
I left it home.
Oh, did you?
I would like to have one of those.
Tonight's Mutant is not one of my favorites.
Is it Sergeant Payne or something?
Major Payne.
Major Payne.
What's that about?
It's like a drill sergeant. kinda-
Isn't it got, what's her name?
It's the people from, the TV show In Living Color, they're the.
Oh,
Actors
okay.
in there.
Well, that goes way back.
Yeah.
We had a very limited selection of movies to pick from, and sometimes they weren't available too.
Yeah.
And it's, some people, they won't license their movie to a theater unless it has more than one screen in it. You know,
Oh,
we
wow.
ran into that before when we were trying to get some movies there. Single screen, nope, won't do it.
We'll make it.
Okay. Always have a good attendance for those things.
Hopefully it's accomplishing the goals of the DDA to get more people downtown. Now, hopefully after the bridge is fixed, October sometime. I know the businesses have been very upset about the lack of traffic driving by,
Yeah,
Oh, yeah. Sure.
which you never think is actually compose a significant portion of your business. Because, I have businesses which I go to and I know they're there. So I guess I just don't think it'd be, oh, well, I just happen to be driving by and I'll stop by while I'm in town.
well, I told somebody the other night, so yeah, we're going up to Casey's, to get some ice cream. They're like, oh yeah, with that detour, we just go over to Culver's. I'm like, it's the same distance.
You're right.
By the time you go around, it's the same distance as driving all the way out there.
Because we got the flashing red up there, it's not a big deal.
It's really not, but it's somehow psychologically that perception of having to take the detour, I'm not gonna do it.
Yeah.
I have to say though, when we had our business downtown, we were very much dependent on our neighborhood customers. Very much dependent.
And the planning commission just approved of a Jimmy John's, with a drive-through,
Oh, where's that gonna be at?
where the current In Tandem Credit Union is.
Yep.
They were not happy with the first draft, but they felt pretty comfortable with the second draft.
That's because we did all of that hard work on the drive-through for Bigby.
Joe, but that was actually, I think, a conflict. Because the planning commission felt that the people going to the drive-through for the Big B would conflict with the traffic for the. Yeah, it's gonna cause some problems, but it'll just take training people to get used to it, I guess. But I'm looking forward to it. It's one of my favorite restaurants.
Yes.
I don't think their times will, Bigby is gonna be more morning and
I was at so I drive through there regularly, and I was at the Big B drive-through at 12:30 afternoon. And there were 7 or 8 cars in that drive-through.
In Rockford.
No, here. The Big B drive-through.
Yeah, that's a busy.
And all I
That's a
could
busy
think,
place,
yeah,
yeah.
but at noon, you're getting your coffee at noon?
They
Oh,
actually have good food there.
Yeah, they've got a bagel sandwich that's pretty
Uh-huh.
good.
They're yummy. I like them. I'm just so happy that they widened that back alley there. 'Cause it was only room enough for one car to go through.
But you remember I don't know if you remember, we had to do that whole thing with the property behind it. There wasn't enough room, and so then they had to what do they sell some of the property to the other one, or?
Yeah,
Like that strip mall area?
Yeah, the vacant piece of property, didn't they had to sell some of their land
Yeah, a little strip or something.
to make it wide enough so we could get cars through there.
yeah, they needed it.
Mr. Spitzbergen, you just tell us when you're ready and we'll,
Give me a couple minutes.
We also had another one, decide not to build one of the family farm, they were gonna have building there, but they.
Yeah, it was originally gonna be the Jimmy John. And a marijuana place, then it was gonna be a marijuana place and Jimmy John.
Ooh, get the munchies and.
Go for it.
Go for it, yeah.
Well, now that's gonna be Jimmy John's, the pizza place, the Chinese place, and the marijuana store. And that's it.
Pharmacy and the dental.
Wow.
Yeah, little strip mall in front of the family farm and home, that would have been nice. Use that parking. lot. Trying to develop by hook and crook sometimes.
Are they still doing the internet thing or whatever?
Oh, yeah, they're
Is that,
installing all sorts of fiber optic throughout the entire
is
community.
that what they're doing? That, because I've been gone for 3 weeks, so.
Yep, it takes them pretty much the whole summer to do the city.
Okay,
Yeah, of course, with the bridge project and the water projects, and we have the water tower down for a couple days. Some guy in a bulldozer ran over one of our fire hydrants, and
oh, wow.
all sorts of stuff happening in the last couple of weeks. Poor Bill's running around like a chicken with his head cut off.
Construction season.
Yeah, yeah, he sees them take off in the truck.
And next year, we're gonna try to start doing some of these road paving projects that we put off this year, because we didn't wanna overstress the city with the amount of, traffic. One of the projects we were gonna do was Fifth Street, since it's the bypass for Main Street. We figured put that off till next year. We also got a couple of sidewalk projects, we got grants for.
Do you know for sure where they're going?
No, because we originally had a pedestrian bridge set to go over the creek just north of Cherry at Fifth. And, our engineers are now of the opinion that they're unlikely to get Eagle approval. And it would substantially increase the cost, all the paperwork and stuff we would have had to do, so. If the main goal is a north-south route, I think what we're gonna do is create more east-west to the White Pine Trail, both north and south of the creek. So for example, the CTA, right now, they've got sidewalk until Fifth, then no sidewalk from Fifth until the White Pine Trail. So I suspect when the CTA goes and does stuff, they walk across to the north, continue, and then come back across, right? Well, why add 2 street crossings for kids who are going from the CTA to the library? The problem is, once you get closer to the creek there, there's no like land to put a sidewalk on, and it's next to the creek. So we'll have to see if Eagle will give us approval for that sidewalk. But we do want to have sidewalk from Pam and Jerry's house, south to Muskegon. It's all real bad sidewalk. And then along, was that Northern Lights? At Beach Street there. We'd like to see Beach go from Wriggle all the way to Nice Sidewalk, probably Main Street. Sidewalks are ridiculously expensive too.
It's been great. I mean,
We
like,
got across creek.
the last, what, year or so? All the
Yeah.
new sidewalks that were put
We
in.
brought in probably about $1 million in grants for sidewalks. Yeah, but we can't have free sidewalks forever. Eventually, someone's gonna have to pay for it.
all right, recess is over. We're back in session.
Okay.
So why don't you, want to step up to the podium there? We are, recording this and we want to make sure we got everything that you're saying.
Okay. Hopefully I've got everything here.
Now that you're at the microphone, why don't you introduce yourself so we have it?
My name is Dan Spitzbergen. I'm the owner of the property at 84 First Street in Cedar Springs.
Mhm.
Mr. Owens,
Yes.
I think technically this property is owned by an LLC.
I'm the major stockholder
Okay.
of the LLC that holds this property.
Okay. Which is Cedar Holding Company, right?
Correct.
All right, so you want to speak to the variance application that you have that you've submitted to us.
Yes and no. Okay, this is a confusing situation, just as the city manager had mentioned. Back in 1982, the council at that time offered non-conforming status to the existing multifamily properties that were already being used when they instituted the R1 zoning in Cedar Springs. We have this situation all through town. It's not just on the east side, it's on the south side, it's all through town, where there are multifamily units in an R1 zone, because there was no R1 zone prior to 1982. It was an by case situation, and they were granted approvals, and building permits were issued. Rezoning was done, and that's how these properties exist. In 1982, the residents of Cedar Springs said, we don't want this anymore. And they instituted the R1 zone. So at that time, there were many existing multifamily homes in what is now the R1 zone. So to solve this problem, they made a non-conforming status that made those properties legal non-conforming at that time. That status is carried through up until the current city manager has chosen to determine that they are no longer legal non-conforming. So here we are.
Mr. Owens, if I may, this has nothing to do. with the
Please don't
variance.
interrupt me, sir.
I'm just trying to move this along because we could sit here for 6 or 7 hours with you talking about non-conforming status, which has nothing to do with variances.
You told me the only way I could proceed was with a variance, so that's why I'm here.
Correct, a variance, not non-conforming. So I apologize for interrupting, but I feel like if we want to talk about non-conforming status, we're going to get no closer to solving the situation that he has, which is that banks are not willing to mortgage a property that can't be rebuilt. Non-conforming properties, if they're destroyed, cannot be rebuilt. That's what the
They
law
can
says.
be if it's less than 60%.
Well, if, Mr. Chair, if his bank is, or whatever bank, is willing to mortgage a property that is destroyed to less than 60% of the value, then I don't know what we're doing here. He seems to be satisfied with legal non-conforming status. Then maybe he just needs to withdraw his application. But if he's serious about wanting a variance so that the property can be rebuilt after it's destroyed to 60% or greater, he needs a variance and he needs to address the legal standards that were in the application.
Okay, and I am addressing those standards. I thought I had done so in the application. I'd be glad to clarify anything that's not clear.
I guess my question is, when was the reestablishment, when was it changed as far as legal non-conforming status? You say it needs to be
It
reestablished.
never legally was. The city manager just chose to make that decision
When was that?
sometime during his tenure here. It's been within the last 2 years that I'm aware of it.
Is there anything in writing that says that?
No.
There's nothing in writing.
Not to my knowledge.
Well, that's just,
There's no
Here's-
zoning ordinances that have changed.
Okay,
There's no zoning ordinance language that's changed. The ordinance language is still existing.
You said, when the house was built and when, 1982 it was changed. When did you purchase it?
I purchased it in, boy, 90. I'm believing it's 96, 98, one of those two. I'd have to dig back in records.
20 years.
I've had it for close to 20 years, yes. This is not a recent acquisition.
But it was after things had been changed in 1982.
I'm sorry?
It was after the change in 1982.
Correct.
So,
Yes.
so that would have been something that you would have been aware of.
I was under the impression it was legal non-conforming at that time, yes.
I actually remember when that building was built. And there was some kind of conundrum. I don't know what it was. They spot zoned it or,
Well, it was spot zone, to be honest with you.
Was it?
Looking back in the history, yes, it has been rezoned to what at that time
Mhm.
was Zone B, which allowed multifamily homes. It was rezoned in 1972,
Mhm.
that lot, before it was built.
Okay.
See, that's way before this whole R1 zoning came about.
I always wondered why they didn't move it back farther instead of, closer to the road.
I guess I'm confused. What's your concern?
My major concern
Yes,
is that I've attempted to sell this property and the city will not acknowledge it. Up until just recently, the city wouldn't acknowledge that it had legal non-conforming status. And also they would not give what they call a rebuild letter, which is what banks and finance companies require when you've got a non-conforming property in a zone. Okay, if it were zoned R2, and it was prior to the current R1 zoning, rather than keeping that zone, they blanketed, made everything R1 and then gave these properties a non-conforming status is the way they did it. So it is technically a four-family existing in a current R1 zone.
correct.
And as such, the banks see that as a problem. Because if the city were to say, well, we're experiencing it right now. Okay,
Uh-huh.
I thought we had no problem, but now we do.
So the banks have said that to you, that there's a concern.
They want a rebuild letter saying that if it's damaged or destroyed, that it can be rebuilt. Okay, because see, a lot of times if you have a property that's used, well, it's a multifamily in an
Right.
R1 zone. If it
Right.
were damaged, it couldn't be rebuilt as a multifamily unit because it's in the R1 zone. Okay, and so they want to know that should it be damaged, it can be rebuilt as a multifamily in the R1 zone. And that's where we're coming up with a sticky point here.
It was damaged more than the 60%, which you were aware of, correct?
Mhm.
Okay. Okay. And you told them that, within the bylaws, the 60%, when you purchased it, that you were aware of this information,
Well, I've been aware of it. It's future buyers that are the problem.
future buyers.
Okay, because the city has not been willing to grant a rebuild letter for the banks
Is that true?
for future financing.
So keeping in mind, not everything he's saying is, in my opinion, true. Some of it's mixed with opinion. The issue here is, as far as I can see it, is this. Mr. Spitzbergen is under the information and belief that the property is legal non-conforming and has been since 1982. The city is working with a number of landlords trying to figure out what is and is not legal non-conforming. Not, again, really part of this discussion, but I'll entertain it for the purposes of this particular question. Even if Mr. Spitzbergen is correct, which again, I'll grant the conversation we're having.
Mm-hmm.
That this property is legal non-conforming. He's missing the point. The point is, legal non-conforming properties cannot be rebuilt after they're destroyed, period. So if he's going to say, well, I want this property to be legal non-conforming, he's defeating himself. Because what he really wants is for the property to be able to be rebuilt if it were destroyed, which is what he needs a variance for. So if the board wants to grant him legal non-conforming status for purposes of this conversation, that doesn't affect anything to me.
Correct.
At some point soon, I'm certain, because the council has ordered it, the city staff is gonna be working with all the landlords to verify and make perpetual the legal non-conforming status that some, may legally have and some may not legally have. It doesn't really matter. But what Mr. Spitzbergen really needs here is a variance. And he needs to address the legal standards which are required for this board to grant him a variance. As I indicated in my opening statement, I believe there is probably sufficient evidence both ways. But it's not my argument to make, it's his. And so getting caught up on this legal non-conforming stuff
Mm-hmm.
is not advancing the discussion.
Is, if we grant a variance to the property as is right now, and something happens to it, it can never be a single family or something
kind
else
of.
in R1.
So if the board were to grant a variance and the building, the quadplex, were to burn down,
Mm-hmm.
the owner of the property would then have the ability to rebuild regardless of how destroyed it was. Or they could at any point in the future abandon the current use and then go some other use that's legally permitted.
According to what I've been studying on use variances, when done appropriately, use variances allow for administrative flexibility to address unique properties. A unique property would be a multi-family, purpose-built, like that apartment, that building.
Ms. Powell, just so we're clarifying, you're reading something, but that was a little editorializing you just did.
That's what that is,
Does it specifically say on what you're reading that the purpose-built multifamily?
no, strictly the multi-use, purpose-built buildings is, to me, a, unique building as compared to the homes that have been, the single-family homes that have been reconstructed into apartments. And, we have several fourplexes, the 8-plex. And we have to address all these issues. The primary purpose of a variance is to allow a reasonable use of the land, allow a reasonable return on one's investment. And that's all kind of things I agree with. A variance is never intended to allow property owners to avoid compliance with zoning ordinances. And those granted with little or no justification may have the effect to encourage others to avoid compliance with the ordinance. This is a variance I feel comfortable with in the purpose-built buildings, such as the quadplexes we have, the 8-plex, that they, or anybody owning one of those unique buildings in a R1 that's been there for 50 years. I haven't heard from or seen one person from the R1 neighborhoods come in and complain about them. So how can we include a variance in this situation?
Well, so Ms. Powell, some of the things that you said there are not the standards by which we are to make the determination. And while I think there's evidence to go either way. Some of those things are your opinions. And one of the questions that has to be determined, which are on the application, which applicant failed to address, is whether the property can be put to any other reasonable use. And so I just want to make sure that
Mhm.
we're talking about this one specific property.
Mhm.
Because you also indicated that there's an 8-unit apartment.
Mhm.
Purpose-built quadplex is going to be distinguishable
Mhm.
from 8.
Right,
Now, again, one of the things that was not addressed is the city has a table of uses in our zoning ordinance.
and I did look those over.
So in the R1 zoning district, you're
Mhm.
permitted to have a single family home, a community center, a church, a park, et cetera, et cetera.
Cluster home.
So can this quadplex really be used as a church? I don't think so. I mean, that's an argument for the applicant to make.
Mhm.
Can it be used as a park? It'd be a very weird park, right? And so he might have an argument to be made that this is the only reasonable use of this specific property. But you also, and this is an interpretation issue for the board. If he gets the legal non-conforming status, which he's been arguing about this whole,
Right, right.
and the property were to burn down,
Mhm.
now the land itself underneath the building which currently exists, would that be put to a reasonable use that is permitted in the R1 zoning district? It's a 66 by 132 size lot, which is a standard single-family residential house lot here in the city of Silver Springs. So the board has to make a determination, and I have no opinion about whether we're talking about the building as it currently is, or as the building or the property might be if it were to be destroyed at some point in the future. Because you're looking to protect both the neighborhood and the individual property owner's rights. And there's 2 ways to do it: the legal non-conforming status, which he may or may not have, or the variance, which he's here asking about.
Right.
But when we talk about uniqueness, though, we're talking about that's more the property than the building that's on it.
And so I spent quite a bit of time looking at this, and I could not find a single instance where they talked about properties that were already built. These are almost always a situation where there's a piece of land and an applicant is coming in and saying, well, I want to change it to whatever use. And the reason is because there's a stream in the back half, or it's exceptionally narrow, or whatever. Mr. Owens, you're correct that to a certain extent, it's largely about the land. But that's not the situation we find ourselves in, and unfortunately, I don't have any advice to give you. The law didn't seem to talk on that, which is why I'm saying, in this instance, I think it's up to the board to make that determination yourselves and elucidate it on the record for future use.
It's also almost in the business district, which is, probably not the best place to build a single family home. Maybe a park if it burned down.
No, I don't agree with that. It could be used as a single family, I think.
If I could, Mr. Owens, before Mr. Spitzbergen speaks, so Ms. Powell, just the variance isn't the only answer here. What you're suggesting, or at least seeming to suggest, is that the planning commission and the city council might need to look at this as a change of the zoning district, so that this could be considered a special land use or permitted use where it currently is. But now you might cause a policy issue because there are other quadplexes and 8plexes in other locations.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Spitzbergen asked to be recognized.
When this situation first came up 2 years ago in my situation, the city manager was exploring, I think that's the term he used, the possibility of making or bringing to the planning commission or, the ruling bodies, looking at the possibility of making it a transitional zone on the east side of First Street. If you look at the existing buildings there, I think there are 5, if I remember right, multifamily units on the east side of First Street. And currently, and so they are all in the same situation that I am. All right. That would be a reasonable compromise in as a possible cure to some of this problem, but that doesn't cure everything. That's just one more thing that could be considered. So I'm saying it, it doesn't help me today.
So if you receive a variance, you can sell your property and that variance will go along with the sale of the property.
That's the way I understand it.
It stays with the property. It's not
Mhm.
like a sold item.
Right.
So it's something that becomes like a deed restriction or something that's actually recorded.
And that's why the banks would be more likely to loan or mortgage that property.
Correct. And it also helps prospective buyers because a lot of times they'll do background, checks as far as any zoning issues or anything like that. And if the title company in doing a title check,
Mhm.
that would come up so that the people are aware of it before they make a commitment to purchasing the property. And so I would strongly encourage you that if you would grant this variance, that we get it in recordable form and have it put to the county register of deeds. Now, as far as dealing with the unnecessary hardship, that building, when you look at some of the permitted uses, you got like an adult foster care, family home, group homes. These are homes that are like one home structure that would allow multiple people to live there for different situations. Well, this property is built as 4 individual properties. Each one is completely separate, with each one having its own kitchen and each one having its own heating system. And to try to convert this property into one of those uses, I don't think it'd be financially feasible. So,
So it sounds like, he's got a good grasp of the argument of whether it can be put to other reasonable uses. It sounds like maybe he should address that in written form, so this board is aware of what his specific claim and argument on that point is, but there are 5 or 6 other points which he has to address.
What would those points be?
Yeah, what would
besides-
those points be?
So I'm gonna be reading from the application, which is language taken directly from the ordinance. Question 1, please indicate how there is no financially viable use for the building, structure, or land if it is required to be used for a use allowed in the zoning district in which it is located. I believe that's the one that Mr. Spitzbergen probably just spoke about. And I think I would tend to agree with that, as a purpose-built quadplex, especially with 2 of the units upstairs. I think it would be extremely difficult to turn that into any of the other permitted uses in the district. I would not say that I think about all of the properties that might come before this board, but I think that might be a reasonable argument for Mr. Spitzbergen to make. Number 2, how is the condition or situation of the specific piece of property or the intended use of such property for which the variance is being sought unique to that property and not commonly present in the general vicinity of the zoning district? Well, I think it's probably Mr. Spitzbergen's obligation to explain how this property is unique. It might be a good argument for him to say, well, it's a purpose-built quadplex. It was built in 72 or whatever. And there's only 1, 2, 3, 10, 40, 50 of these in the area, surrounded by 500, single-family residential properties. I don't know the numbers. It's not my job. If he wants to make an argument that's unique, he should explain how it's unique, why that's important.
that was in number 1 also.
Number 3, please indicate how the proposed use will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood or the intent of the city's master plan. Obviously, this is going to be difficult for anybody to answer, myself included. Mr. Spitzbergen probably needs to put together an explanation of what the essential character of the neighborhood is. And language from the city's master plan, which shows that the introduction of a multi-family home, a quadplex, probably does not interfere with the intent of the master plan. And Ms. Powell, you brought up some good points earlier about, well, it's only 1 street off the B2 zoning district. It could act as a buffer zone even if informally through a variance instead of a zoning district. As to reasons why it would not alter the essential character of the zoning district of the neighborhood, which is residential. Number 4, please indicate how the immediate practical difficulty causing the need for the variance request was not created by an affirmative action of the applicant. I think he might have a difficult time explaining this one. Applicant indicated that he bought the property in the 90s. He should have been aware at the time that the property was probably non-conforming in some manner. And as he indicated, the city's had the non-conforming law in the book since '82. So he should have been aware and should have had the opportunity to investigate those in '82 or '96, whenever he indicated he bought the property. But he may be able to find some reason why the difficulty that requires the variance at this point was not caused by him. Those are his arguments to me. And Ms. Powell, as you also indicated from reading from some form that you had printed out, there's all sorts of information available on the internet discussing these issues. I also read some of those prior to this meeting while putting together the information I put together. Let's see here. Our ordinance is at section 32-103. Applicant obviously can go and take a look at that. It does provide a little bit additional information that's not on the form, such as subpart 2, the current situation or a specific piece of property is unique because subpart A, exceptional narrowness, shallowness, or shape of the property, exceptional topographic conditions or other extraordinary situations on the land, building, or structure, use or development of the property immediately adjoining the property in question, or any other physical characterization or situation on the land, building, or structure that by the Board of Appeals might deem to be extraordinary. These are all the questions that are in the law, which at least I didn't feel were properly addressed by the applicants. And like at the beginning of the meeting, I thought maybe we'd give them the opportunity to go back and redraft.
And we also, we're not, because of his application, we're not considering the non-conforming status, right?
No.
The applicant's just asking us to consider the variance.
Correct.
Yes.
So that's part of what I think Mr. Womack is saying about presenting your evidence. You're in your application, you're talking about the non-conforming status, which is confusing because we're trying to just deal with evidence for variance purposes, not for non-conforming. So you're kind of mixing your arguments, which is not bolstering one or the other. So does that make sense?
No, it doesn't. Because everything has been fine with this property for 40 years. And all of a sudden we have a problem. Now, I was not under the impression when I purchased this property, I would ever need to get a variance for anything. But as a solution to this issue, the city recommended my only solution would be to come before the Zoning Board of Appeals to grant an appeal. So that's what I've done. I've tried to be very clear about in the attached letter, there's 2 pages attached to my application. I don't know if you've seen them too, but
What does it
I'm-
mean
I'm s-
where the lot was rezoned in 1972? It was rezoned from what to what? Do you have any?
it was rezoned from it was rezoned from zone A, which is single family only,
Mhm.
to zone B, which was residential multifamily. That's what they had at that time.
Then like in 86, they rezoned it to the single
80
family.
82, they changed everything to R1 and then gave non-conforming status to all the existing property.
Well, as Mr. Womack said, I think that you can make a really good argument for a variance, and if we can approve the variance, then I believe at that point, with our approval of the variance, we can then, correct me if I'm wrong, but we can send it back to planning commission to then
So,
address kind of the.
yeah, so if this board were to grant a variance, it stops here. There's no need to go back to the planning commission for anything. Either myself or the clerk would, put together a letter indicating exactly what happened. We can give it to the applicant who could, if he wanted to, submit it to the county clerk, to be put in the chain of title. But, you know, this would be in the city's records. We'd obviously be willing to give the applicant a copy of whatever letter, you know, what the board voted on. But, you know, I go back to the point, we've heard all sorts of good arguments, just none of them have been written down by the applicant.
The, what I've studied on this is the use variances are in effect rezoning a piece of property without the benefit of the planning commission and legislative body weighing in on the request. So we can say yes or no. In many instances, the effect and result impact is similar to that experienced by spot zoning, which we don't want.
I may, Ms. Powell?
Yes.
So, Mr. Stickford is correct that a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, we identified this as a potential problem. And I worked with both the former planner and the city attorney trying to draft language that would address this situation.
And we're working on that.
And I spent a considerable amount of time and effort trying to come up with some language that would both solve this problem while not changing the essential character of the neighborhood.
Right?
And as far as we could determine, the essential character of the neighborhood is single-family residential.
Right.
And so any language that we could come up with would have resulted in essentially what you're talking about, either some form of spot zoning,
Mhm.
which is highly undesirable.
Right.
Or would change the characterization of the neighborhood, which is single-family residential. So you're not wrong. There's a huge conundrum here. I just didn't feel at that time that we could solve it via some kind of legislative change.
Well, I feel there's a big difference between a purpose-built building and a redo of a single-family home, which is, you know, all through the city, and that's when that existing city council had to put a stop to it, or there probably would have been a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
But these were not single-family homes to begin with. We have to take that in consideration.
So Ms. Powell, would you be making an argument for substantial justice if the board were to grant this variance and possibly others in the future?
Only if it involved a purpose-built building that was purposely built for apartments. I don't know how you guys feel, but
I think substantial justice is one of the things that's talked about in the literature about good reasons to grant a variance.
that's what I'm thinking.
But I'm still of the opinion the applicant needs to go back and readdress some of these issues. You might want to read the arguments that I put together. That might be reasonable.
I think that Mr. Womack actually, did a good job formulating arguments for you, but you have to present them, not the city manager.
Well, and that's where I'm at. I agree with the things that have been said. You know, I don't know what that justice term involves. It's a legal term, but I'm under the impression that it probably implies doing the right thing. And my opinion is the right thing is to allow this family to exist in the R1 zone.
Well, I guess,
It is, there is language in the ordinance that gives the options for the city should the non-conforming status ever stop. where they can condemn the property and they can tear it down, buy it and tear it down and rebuild or sell it as a single family lot. You know, you can do those kind of things. That's all covered in the ordinance language. But that's not what we have right now. And so as a built for family, without tearing it down, I mean, any changes to that building would basically make it a situation that you might as well tear it down and start over because it was built as a four family.
Right. Any other questions? Paul, you're again.
None, right?
I guess I'm going by the rules of variances and how what they mean to me. And, when considering use variances, the ZBA should remember that the primary purpose of the variance is to allow a reasonable use of the land. To allow a reasonable return on one's investment. And, in my opinion, if that was built 50 years ago, it's been there for 50 years, that is a reasonable use of that land. Especially when you look around, it's surrounded by multifamily homes, and they're not all gonna burn down at once. So the actual, character of that neighborhood is not gonna change overnight. And I can also tell you this, I was on a board once a long time ago, just historically, where you could not live above a commercial building in Cedar Springs unless you were an undertaker. And that all changed. So, you know, we always have to be aware that there are things that change.
Mr. Spitzberg, anything else for you to share with us?
Well, I was hoping that you got enough information from me today to make a decision. I don't know if you feel you have or have not.
Somebody else said they had any questions. Yes. Yep. Oh, okay, so, make a motion to, nobody online that wants to make a comment? Okay. All right, so I'll make a motion that we close the public hearing at this time. Second it. Discussion. All right, all in favor of closing the hearing, aye? Aye. Opposed, no? Okay, motion carries. So, you know, I don't disagree with a lot of the arguments that were made. You know, the applicant said, I agree with what was said. You made the statement, in my opinion, those are all good, but I think we need the applicant to make those arguments and give those statements himself, not us. Our job is not to make the argument for the applicant. Our job is to listen to the arguments from the applicant and then make a ruling based on that. So, I mean, I guess I'm of the opinion that right now, I don't think that what the applicant submitted is the right information for us to consider for a variance, because it's confused with the legal use thing. So I guess I would be open to tabling it, and then I think that he's got all of the information that he needs to answer these questions specifically with the variance the answers for the variance thing. So I think the arguments have been made for the applicant. He just has to put them down and submit them to himself. That would be my, because otherwise I don't know that I don't think that I have in my mind enough information from the applicant to make a ruling on the variance request.
Well, we have to educate ourselves on the use of variances. And, as he brings in his facts and opinions and we just need to know how to use a variance and, there's information, we've all been to classes and
Mm-hmm.
there is a reason and a use for variances and
I don't disagree, but I don't, like I said, I don't think it's our place to make the argument for him, and I don't think that he filled out here exactly addressing the variances to make his own case. So that's why I'd like to give him the benefit of the doubt of tabling it, and give him a chance to come back as opposed to denying it and start the whole thing all over again.
well, I can understand that. I don't think it'll be too much to ask for to, redo the application as according to the ordinances and how variances affect your position.
I agree. I think he has everything that he needs and since we've pretty well discussed every angle of this, I think that once if we get the proper, the answers that address those concerns, I think our next meeting could be lightning quick,
Yep,
potentially. Haven't heard it all.
got some guidance and,
So my motion would be to table the variance request for 84 South First Street at this time. Support for that.
Support.
Further discussion on it?
Mr. Owens, is it your intention to, schedule another hearing after applicant has submitted a updated form?
I would, yep.
Good one.
Then first, do we need to set us another public hearing for that second?
All right, all in favor of that motion, aye?
Aye.
All
Aye.
opposed, no. Okay. Motion carries.
I don't think we need to address the dates at this point, because we don't know when applicant's gonna be able to. I'm sure Madam Clerk will contact you guys. At some later date. Yes, I will accept it, a modified addendum application with no additional fee. But I would recommend that the applicant read the arguments put together by the city manager, and consider those for resubmission.
As well as some of the other information that I think we gave you. So I don't think we have any other business, so I'll make a motion to adjourn.
second.
Okay, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed, no?
I need Jerry Hall here to vote no. Usually does. Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you.